right, guys, we are back. We are looking at chapter 19. This is Reconstruction. This is what they call the time period right after the war of basically reconstructing America, because there were things that were destructed during the war and we had to put them back together. Things like the South, you've got all these battles fought down south. Well, we tore up railroads. Things were destroyed. Cities were surrounded. It just, there's a lot to be done with that. But the main thing about Reconstruction is the way to get the slaves introduced back into society, to reconstruct a society where there's not a second class, basically, of citizens. It was to put everybody at the whole level. It was a method to bring southern states back to the Union. So you're going to go through this Reconstruction period. So, first thing that happens, March 4th, 1865. Now, the war is not over yet, but it is getting close. This is the point where you've got Lee on the run. He's going from Petersburg to Richmond to where the surrender is going to happen. And Grant is continuing to chase him because Grant is the boy for Lincoln. He will not slow down. He keeps right after going after Lee. So by the time that we have our second round of elections and Lincoln's second term, he's going to become president again. Because at this point, the South, because they've seceded, there are no southern states. So the only states that are going to vote for the northern president are the northern states. But Lincoln is not running unchallenged. There are people that are saying, hey, let's just end the war. So there's people, and one general, I believe it was McClellan, that was running against him. But Lincoln is able to be reelected. And then when he gives his inauguration speech, it is close to the end. And that's why in his second inaugural address, Lincoln calls for several things. He calls for malice towards none. He did not want to see the southern states punished. He wanted to see them brought back into the Union. It wasn't a foreign country we're fighting. It was a disagreement in family, is what it boils down to when you're dealing with the United States. So he does not want to see mean things done to the Southern. He doesn't even want to see hatred in our heart towards what happened. This is a family squabble. It's over. Let's go back to being family. He also says we need to treat them with kindness. He doesn't want them to have to be beaten down and abused. If you've ever been in an argument with a friend or an argument with someone and you lost, you hang on to it. And he does not want them to have to hang on to it more because other people are saying things. And he says the whole point of this now is to bind up the nation's wound, if you have a wound, you're bleeding, it hurts. And when you bind it up, it begins to heal. And that's what he wants to see, is Lincoln is so looking for us all to come back together as a nation and continue on. Lincoln, though, in the second inauguration, as he's running for president, he does something a little bit different. In the first one, he had Hannibal Hamlin as his vice president, and he is a great vice president the first time. But with the war being about over, Lincoln realizes that when he's about to run, he needs a diverse ticket so that when the United States is brought back in and we're all one nation again, that the South feels some validity to what they've done and everything. And so Lincoln does not choose Hannibal again. He chooses Andrew Johnson as vice president. Johnson was a Democrat and he was from Tennessee. So you've got a Southerner right here, one of the more progressive Southerners in this situation because he's going to be from Tennessee. But you're about to find out this was probably the worst thing that could happen for the South. It was the absolute worst thing that could happen for the freed slaves, is to put a Southern Democrat from Tennessee in charge of the nation, because no one saw that Lincoln was going to immediately be assassinated and then Johnson would take over immediately. So in his second time running, he chooses Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was a tailor. He's from East Tennessee, which lets you know that he wasn't totally for slavery, but he had grown up enough in the South when there was slavery going on. he's actually going to hold a little prejudice to him and everything. And I think that's fair enough to say, is that he had some prejudice going on. And so Lincoln, in the effort to show a balanced ticket, has Andrew Johnson become vice president. Usually not a big deal because the vice president doesn't do much. This time, going to be a huge deal. All right, Lincoln had came up with his own Reconstruction plan. You need to know that it is called the 10% plan. It had a lot of interesting things to it. He said, first off, 10% of each population of each state had to swear to obey the Constitution. That is a very minimum of the population. He's using 10% from the Bible of tithe, give back 10%. And he's hoping that the nation will, at least 10% in the South of each state, will wanting to come back into the Union. He says also they have to set up a new government. If you remember, Tennessee, we had our own constitution, and then things would change, and we would change the constitution to where slaves didn't have rights, or they say these people couldn't vote, or anything like that. And all of a sudden, all the southern states' constitution was so racial that he's like, each state has got to come up with a new constitution that doesn't have things about slavery or things, because it is no more. And each state had to abolish slavery and ratify the 13th Amendment. When I mean ratify, remember it's during the Civil War that they passed the 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery, but the South was not part of the United States at that time. Now, as you come back in, your state has to say, we will obey no slavery, and we will sign off on that with the Constitution as being part of it. And his other part was he wanted all the Confederates pardoned. He didn't want to see these people go to jail because of war crimes or have to go punishment. He wanted everybody just to go back to being. Lincoln he's really wants to see the United States come whole again. There are writings and stuff that show that one of Lincoln's plans was every African American that wanted to go back to Africa, we were going to pay for a boat ticket to let them go on home. And Lincoln, he was trying to be generous to the slaves. He was trying to be generous to the South. He was trying to be. Lincoln's 10% plan probably would have really worked. He wasn't putting strenuous things on him at first. Problem was, look at the last line. 5 days after the war, Lincoln's killed. The war's going to end in April. He makes this plan in March. Never gets to reenact any of it because of his assassination. So let's go into that. April 14th, 1865. Lincoln, and on this night, the war is over. He wants to go see a play. He wants to go out because that was like going to the movie theaters in our day, was to go see a play. There were 2 theaters in town. One was actually showing what he wanted to see, Hamlet, but it was his wife that wanted to see. The play was called Our American Cousin. And it's a funny play. She was looking for something more lighthearted. Little unbeknown, Lincoln was very big into Shakespeare, loved all the different plays and everything. And he decides to go to Ford's Theater that night. John Wilkes Booth is going to be the one who assassinates him. It is a simple assassination for him in the fact that he is a theater. He is like the Brad Pitt or the Vin Diesel of his day, to where he's in the what would be the movies of the time and everything like that. And so for him to go into a theater, walk right up to the bottom, and no one's stopping him, no one's giving him any grief whatsoever. John Wilkes Booth goes in. There is only one guard for Lincoln that night, and the guy's across the street drinking at a bar. So there literally is no guards. Booth goes to a door where he had drilled a little hole already because he knew that he was going to have to be back there that day, and looked through the little hole, watching for and listening for a spot in the play to where it was the biggest laugh, to where all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of noise. And if you have a lot of noise in the play, you're not going to hear the little things like a door open. And so him being an actor, him being in that play, he had been in that type of play, American Cousin, before. And he waited for the laugh line, and as soon as they make that big laugh, he jerks open the door, puts a derringer to the back of Lincoln's head, and pulls the trigger. He actually had a knife with him just to be safe, but Lincoln slumps forward. At that point, Booth jumps up on the rail and then jumps off onto the stage. As he jumps off, he yells, "Sic Semper Tyrannis, death to the tyrants," is what he says. But as he's jumping off, it's like a 12-foot drop on the stage. They had hooked a flag there in front of the president's box to honor him and the nation being back together from the war. And his foot hooked on that flag, and he fell awkward onto the stage, and he broke his ankle. Actually, it's a little bit above his ankle. It's a high ankle break and everything like that. But he is able to actually limp off the stage and go out the back door. They said most people, I've even heard an interview, which was so cool. It was a guy who was in his 90s and was recounting an interview of, as a little like 5-year-old boy, being at the theater the night that Lincoln was shot. And that was just so interesting to listen to this guy talk. But even the guy said, as a kid and everything, he remembers everybody thinking it was part of the show. I mean, all of a sudden you're watching a play and there's a famous actor jumps up on the stage. And it wasn't until Miss Lincoln screams really loud because she's looking at her husband. His husband's slumped over and he's bleeding. And then everybody, but by that time, dude's off the stage. He had came in the back and asked a stable boy to hold his horse. Here's the thing. Anybody would have done that. If you were standing outside of a theater and Brad Pitt rolled up and said, hey, watch my Lamborghini for a minute, you would stand there and watch that Lamborghini. Just because, hey, wow, I'm doing this for a favor of a great guy. And when Booth comes out, gets on his horse and leaves and everything, they go after this and they arrest the conspirators. One of the people who actually gets arrested is a stable boy for holding the horse. He actually serves time in jail. And I thought that was kind of a crock in the whole grand scheme of things because that boy had no clue. He was just standing there holding a horse's reins. What happens then? Booth is going to flee from Washington. He's going to go for 12 days, and then he's going to be a barn up in Virginia, to where at the barn, he's in the barn. He gets to the barn and he just stays for a couple days, which is kind of weird, but he stays there. The military shows up at this barn in Virginia. Like they knew he was going to be there, and they're told to arrest him. Lincoln said he wants to talk to him, but some soldier shoots through the slats of the barn, kills Booth, and he dies. His body is taken to one of the ironclads at that time, the Monitor Merrimack things. We talked about that in the last thing. And they do a quick autopsy, and then they bury the body, throw it over so that it's, gone, dead, gone. Nobody's going to see it. You have a huge conspiracy around this thing to where people think Booth was helped by somebody higher up to be able to get away with this all. Maybe next week on the last Zoom or something, I can try and talk to y'all about it. It is one of the most interesting conspiracy theories in America's history, because there is a lot of dots you can connect to see that there was something big time going on. I will give you the clue. The secret is all in the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton. And once you start to unravel that, it's an interesting conspiracy. It really is. But here we go. Boom. The war's over. 5 days later, Lincoln is dead. 12 days after that, Booth is dead and he is gone. We'll just go like that, air quotes, in case you want to look up the conspiracy or show up next week and talk about it. So let's move on. There is a picture right there of Ford's Theater. They actually keep it pretty much like it would have looked back then. And if you look there in the picture, you can see where the box off to the side would have been, and the flag is draped there with it. They still do that to this day to show you where he would have jumped from. You can see about the 12-foot fall on the stage, and you can see the booth that Lincoln would have been sitting in. So that is Ford's Theater. I love that Kara Peak puts these pictures in there. Now, Andrew Johnson, then, because Lincoln is not there, they get to enact Andrew Johnson's plan. He will pardon those. Now, remember, the Lincoln wanted to pardon all the Southerners. Andrew Johnson's plan calls for to pardon those that swear an oath. So there's going to be people down south that are pardoned and those that are not pardoned. It's going to start to set up some problems. Andrew Johnson's plan is not going to work at all. Same part as in Lincoln's plan. Each state has to set up a new government and a new constitution so that they have all these things with slavery out of it. And if you set up a new government, you get rid of the people that were very pro-slavery. Andrew Johnson's plan also, he wants to cancel war debts. He was from Tennessee. He almost wants to see everybody's checkbook go back to zero, balanced, instead of having these debts that they've accrued because of all this. You can see he's trying to help the South out that's going to put a burden on the North financially. And he wants them all to ratify the 13th Amendment taken from Lincoln's plan. This is his plan, but he is going to be more racial and have more problems with it as we go through it. So there you go. 13th Amendment, we've already talked about that, is the one that abolished slavery. And that's why they keep having to say they have to ratify the 13th Amendment, which means to approve. All right. Andrew Johnson's plan is going to lead to some problems, though. It is going to, yes, new government. You're going to elect the same Southern people, though. You're going to have a ton of the generals, the colonels, the captains are going to, from the South, going to be put into offices of governor, mayor, representative. And so all of a sudden, those same people that once you've lost, you have an anger towards that other person. It's different if you lose or if you're the one losing. It changes. These people now have a grudge, and they're going to blame the African American for it. They're going to blame the former slaves. And so Andrew Johnson's plans lets all these people right back in office who should not be in office if you're going to put things back together. Also, Andrew Johnson, he let them have the creation of the Black Codes. The Black Codes were a thing to where they really, it is an effort to try and control the former slaves. And I tell you what, we're going to stop right here, and then we will get into the Black Codes on the next one and everything. So thank you for paying attention. We'll see you. I'll see you in about 10 seconds, but the rest of me see me when you watch it again. So thank you. I'm trying to figure out how to turn this off.